Chapter 9. Laughing Waterfalls. Stardom schools had been on an excursion to Badagry before. In the past 10 years, it must have traveled there about 3 times. That included when the school organized a retreat for teachers, lodging them at the Whispering Palms Resort. On the part of the students, they visited renowned and iconic sites in the historical town. JSS1 students also went on an excursion as part of their Welcome to Stardom package, visiting the city of white sand and coconuts. While teachers, some staff and parents might have complaints about the school management, they could not deny it well-deserved credit for giving students great exposure and making learning fun. Apart from never lagging behind in the celebration of special days, Children's Day, Mother's Day and Teacher's Day, it organized parties, concerts and lectures that featured experts from different fields. Some of these programs even took the pupils out of Lagos. During his 2 decades plus with the school, Bipo successfully sold to the management the idea of an excursion per term, to a place of attraction within the country, and an annual international excursion. There were few occasions when the management could not keep to the yearly schedule. Nevertheless, it kept the idea running over 70% of the time. Bipo wanted the students to have a thorough grasp of their country. He was aware many of them came from elite families that would eventually send them abroad after secondary education. He believed the knowledge the learners gained about the country while in foundation schools would enhance their intimacy with the fatherland in the future, because many would never come back. Based on this philosophy, students of the school visited quintessential places like the Ikegosi Warm Springs in Ekiti State, Erin-Ijesha Waterfalls in Osun State, Erin-Ijesha Waterfalls in Osun State and the Awu Waterfalls in Kwara, which is the highest in West Africa, measuring 120 meters above water level and cascading 330 feet down an escarpment. The students also went to the Garara Falls in Niger State. A symbol of Nigeria's rich tourist attractions, the waterfalls exude a gripping natural ambience and wondrous allure. And while they boast ever gurgling waters splashing against joyous ribs of lucky rocks, some of them radiate very interesting stories. For instance, the Ikegosi was, in 1852, discovered by Reverend John S. McGee, from his mission base in nearby Egede Ekiti. He had defied warning by the natives that visiting the springs could be fatal, invoking the wrath of supernatural forces. McGee, however, conquered the myth and wrote, "After seeing it, I felt it could be used for a good purpose. I discussed the possible use of it with some of the mission and convention friends. With the growing interest of Royal Ambassador work, and youth work, we felt that it could best be used by building a youth camp. I took it up with the Ekiti Association and we decided to build a camp for RRAs and GAs. The land was secured through the convention. The state government eventually took over the site and developed it for tourism purposes. The Garara was said to have been discovered by a Gwari hunter, called Bubba, in 1745, almost 2 centuries before some Europeans chanced upon it in 1925. The Erin-Ijesha waterfalls, also known as Olamiran, was discovered in 1140 AD by one of the daughters of Odudwa, forebear of the Yoruba. One source, however, notes that hunters discovered it in 1140 AD. Another, yet, says the site was discovered by a woman called Akinla, the founder of Erin-Ijesha town and a granddaughter of Odudwa. During the migration of Ife people to Erin-Ijesha, to show that Stardom meant business, it listed other waterfalls it planned to visit as the years rolled by. These included the Kwa Falls in Anageje, Calabar, Asop in Plateau, Karu in Nasarawa, and Barup in Gembu, Taraba State. Also, on Bipo's personally researched list were the Orham waterfalls in Enugu, Owerri Azukuka in Anambra, and Agbokum in Cross River State. Others on the to-visit list were the Faran Ruwa waterfalls in Nasarawa State and the Matsirga in Kafanchan, Kaduna State. Bipo recalled sadly that the students, when they visited Ikagosi Warm Springs, did not have enough time to see the Aranta waterfalls nearby. He hoped that even after he might have left stardom, the school would, one day, be on the road to Aranta, a waterfall surrounded by mini rocks, uniquely flaunting 7 distinct steps. Stardom had also been to the Ankara Games Reserve in Bauchi, the National War Museum in Umuahia, Abia State, the Hanging Lake in Aduawaye, Oyo State, the amazing Kano Palace in Kano State, and multi-layered and culture-imbued Uni of Ife Palace in our life. Bipo recalled that the students also explored the site of the tall Oranmian staff, by which Adudwa, the forebear of the Yoruba, was said to have descended from heaven, as well as the elegant ambience of Obafemi Awolowo University, our life, where Mrs. Abidin Gloss graduated with a law degree. At national festivals too, Stardom sometimes stood to be counted. Its students had been part of the Calabar Carnival, Osuna Sogbo Festival, Argungu Festival in Kebbi, and the Afala Festival in Onitsha. Bipo believed Al-Lati Kesu wrote a Yoruba proverb meaning charity begins at home. Thus, Stardom students and graduates should have Lagos tourism etched on their memory. It was why the pupils regularly visited the National Theatre, Iganmu, Surulere, the National Museum, the Musan Center and City Mall, all in Anikan. They had been to the Epa Fish Market, Ijede Warm Spring in the Ikorodu area, as well as the Sungbo Eredo in Epa Ijebu. Described as a system of defensive ditches built in 800-1000 AD. In honor of the Ijebu matriarch, Bilikisu Sungbo. Other places they toured in Lagos included the University of Lagos, Ikoka, the Lagos State University, Ijo, Lagos State Broadcasting Station, Agadingbi, the NTA station on Victoria Island, and African Independent Television Station in Alagbado. They had also been to the headquarters of several big companies such as Chevron, Lekki, Shell, at Broad Street, Uber, First Bank and Conoil Towers in Marina, Globacom and Victoria Island, Mountain in Ikoyi and 9 Mobile on Banana Island. To show the students that life is a potpourri of opposites, the students visited high-class environments like Banana Island, Snake Island and Magodo, and largely derided zones like Mushin Ajagunle and Ijora. They also visited the SOS village in Asolo and other charity homes. Being born in a place like this does not condemn one to a life of penury, Bipo told the students the day they visited Ajagunle. If you are determined, committed to education, make the best use of your talent, time will move you from slum to limelight. You will be surprised to learn that many of those you see on Banana Island started off in slums somewhere in the country. Life is about movement. It is ever ready to move upward folks who make the best use of their talents, money and opportunities. He reminded them that music and soccer stars such as Odion Igalo and Victor Osimhen grew up in the low ends of Lagos. Under Bipo's supervision and insatiable appetite for education by adventure, Stardom had been to the Iju Waterworks in Adian, the Yaba Psychiatric Hospital, where the students were addressed on the evils of hard drugs. The OYASAF Foundation House in Maryland, which has over 7,000 artworks collected privately by Prince Yemisi Adedoyan, and Lagos Blue Rail Megastation in CMS. But in the spirit of World Slavery Day, they were back in Badagry, where the excursion, led personally by Bipo, would have implication for his proposed relocation. Badagry is a significant town in Lagos State and in Nigeria because of its pioneering contact with Atlantic slave traders. It is home to monuments such as the first-story building in the country, built by Henry Townsend in 1846, and where Ajayi Crowther stayed and made the first translation of the Yoruba Bible. Badagry is the base of the Agiya tree under which Christianity was first preached in Nigeria, the Mobi Royal Family Slave Relics Museum, which houses chains, padlocks, rods etc. used on the slaves kept there, en route to the point of no return. and the Siriki Abyss Slave Museum, originally built by an ex-slave-turned-slave trader. During the last excursion, the first port of call for the Stardom team, which comprised 40 students from SS1 to SS3, was the palace of the Akron of Badagry. The king hosted the pupils and served them some refreshment. The monarch explained to the students how Badagry was founded in the late 1720s by Popo refugees from wars with the Fon people of Dahomey. Its contact with white explorers and slave dealers made the town a harbor from which slaves were exported to the Americas. But the story of our industry is far bigger than that of the unfortunate slave trade, the king had said. We are strategically big in business, in agriculture and tourism. As far back as the 1820s, a British trading post was established here. We actually developed as a palm oil port, just as we were big in the importation of cloths. While the return of freed slaves in the 1830s also enriched our history, culture and business, coconut plantations had been established here by the 1880s. There was a comic interlude when one of the students asked Kabayesi if it was true that the name, Badagry, was derived from Agbadarigi. The monarch affirmed the story. Then the trip continued with a visit to the first-story building, where the students spotted the first copy of the translated Bible. They moved to the first primary school in Nigeria, the Anglican Nursery and Primary School, formerly Nursery of Infant Church, located in the Tapo area of Badagry. It was established in 1843. They were also at the point of no return, where natives captured as slaves were thrown into ships that took them to Western countries. These slaves were, thereafter, resold abroad and taken to the farms of white masters. At the Black Heritage Museum, Bipo was emotionally moved by the memory of the ugly experiences the enslaved went through. This was after he had seen relics and listened to a narration by the museum officer. He felt Africans had always been targets of barbarity and embarrassment. That was what happened during the transatlantic slave trade between 1500 and 1900. But the principal had more questions. How, for instance, would anyone explain what had become the vogue? That is, Africans themselves, especially Nigerians, in Japafit, voluntarily and desperately walking into the workforce of who seemed to be the Yester masters. The new slavery, as he saw it, was what many were now dying to be part of. They were having sleepless nights, praying and fasting to get visas. They were selling all they had to pay fair. They are abandoning families, schools, work, businesses and professions they built over the years, just to escape the harsh environment at home and collect high-valued dollars, pounds and euros abroad. In process, many took up all the oddest jobs and became the ever-weeping race, accursedly rushing into enslavement after centuries of the transatlantic. The sentiment and resentment swelled through Bipo as he pictured himself also on the streets of Europe.